All right, let's talk a little bit about electronic meetings and virtual meetings, because I know that that continues to just be a really hot topic. The first question you need to ask when you're thinking about holding a virtual meeting is whether state law, your state law where you're incorporated, allows you to do it. And often whether it does is different for a board versus a membership meeting. If it does not, you then need to check your bylaws and see if they allow you to meet virtually. The default rule is that you cannot meet virtually unless state law or your bylaws allow you to do so. If they don't, if they're silent, there's not a reason to panic. You just need to think through, there are options for how to take action instead. And it may mean that you take action by written consent, which is where everybody who has a vote or has the opportunity to vote at that meeting does so in writing and mails that vote in. The hard part about that is that everybody has to participate in the vote in order for that to become effective. You also want to think about the actions that you're taking along a spectrum of risk. So you may need to go ahead and take some actions via virtual meeting, knowing that it's not explicitly provided for, and then come back later in person and have your group ratify the actions taken. I can be comfortable with that given the times that we're in, depending on the sort of level of seriousness of the decision you're making. So doing an election that way, or changing bylaws, or making decisions about real estate, those are kind of decisions you want to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's and don't have questions. The others are important too, but you want to think of them along a spectrum of risk. When you are having virtual meetings, the baseline rule is that everyone participating needs to be able to hear everyone else simultaneously. So that rules out using having like an email meeting. That's not a thing. Or having a meeting by chat. Those aren't things, because there's not the ability to simultaneously hear one another like you could in person. By the same token, you don't need to try to replicate an in-person meeting. That there's a balance to be found. So the baseline is simultaneously hearing one another. Now, most folks these days are meeting on Zoom, and that can work quite well. And so one thing I've seen work well there as far as managing discussion is to have folks check the green check mark or red X if they want to speak in favor or opposed, and then have the presiding officer recognize people off of that roster who have checked one of those icons. What does not work well is to allow discussion via the chat feature through Zoom. And the reason that is because it allows one person to dominate the conversation. There's no limits on debate, and there's no way to have an organized debate. You just have a million people chatting and saying whatever they want. And there's no reason to way to control what people are saying. So I would encourage you, if you're going to hold your meeting on Zoom, to disable the chat feature or make it only available to those who are facilitating the meeting, and then to use some of the other reaction icons to organize your debate. It's not perfect, but it can work. And then you can use the polling feature to vote. That can work quite well. If you need to have a situation where a vote is anonymous, I have not yet experienced a virtual meeting where the client didn't use a separate voting platform outside of Zoom than to take that vote and allow it to be anonymous. And that's also helpful in a church context, because of course in a church context, you often have at least two voters sitting behind the screen at the business meeting, two people who are spouses of one another, and they're logged in on one login. And so, but they represent two votes. And so that becomes a little bit more complicated. Another thing that does not constitute a virtual meeting is recording your business meeting ahead of time and playing a video of it, what you want to say. That allows no interaction. That is not a deliberative process.